Don't forget to check out and grab your copy of one of 3 football game plan books, What Did Football Teach Me?, Football, A Love Story, and Stiff Arming Football Myths. You can find them on our website at footballgameplan.com/books. Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff, presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Mike McCarthy is the producer behind the boards, and we are rolling right along in this college football season as we've already reached Week 7 in the football championship subdivision. Last week was full of surprises, and this week shapes up to be more of the same coming from the FCS. Here's what we have on tap for this week's episode. We'll take an early look at what we believe to be an early mock playoff field for the FCS in our FCS Kickoff bracketology. And with so many former FCS players playing well in both the NFL and the CFL, we'll take a look at some of the top prospects this week and their matchups. And as always, we'll take you around the FCS landscape to preview some of the games, as well as bring you our stats FCS Game of the Week. But first, let's take a look at some of the top storylines heading into Week 7 as we get things kicked off by going into our 4-minute offense. The old football adage goes, offense sells tickets, but defense wins games and championships, and that statement couldn't be any more true as we apply that logic to the FCS season. We've been treated to some outstanding defensive football this year, some coming from the usual suspects like North Dakota State, Jacksonville State, Central Arkansas, Illinois State, and North Carolina A&T, just to name a few. But we've also seen some new teams step up on that side of the ball as well. Campbell, Columbia, Kennesaw State, and Weber State are all doing a solid job defensively. Both Campbell and Columbia are atop their conference or league because of it. Reigning national champion James Madison gave up some big plays last season, but this year their defensive output has matched their offensive output, and they look unbeatable as they try to make a return trip to Frisco, Texas in January. The Alabama State Hornets made a head coaching change this past weekend as Brian Jenkins was relieved of his duties. In just 2.5 years in Montgomery, Alabama, Jenkins compiled a 9-17 record. He was brought in back in 2014 to move the program forward, and things looked good in his first year, going 6-5 with the second place finish in the SWAC's East Division. But a 3-7 2016 season and an 0-5 start to this year was enough to seal his fate. In my opinion, the move to fire Coach Jenkins at this juncture of his tenure and in this season is a bit premature. Now, we know Coach Jenkins is a great coach, as evident by his 46-14 record at Bethune-Cookman, where he won 4 MEAC titles with 3 FCS playoff appearances, winning the MEAC Coach of the Year 3 times while taking home the AFCA FCS Coach of the Year award twice. Don Hill-Ely will be the interim head coach for the remainder of the Hornets season. ESPN's famed College Game Day makes a return trip to James Madison this weekend for their weekly college football show. This will be College Game Day's second trip in 3 years to JMU as they play host to Villanova. Back in 2015, over 12,000 rabid Duke fans gathered in the quad to cheer on JMU, and this will be the 8th time ESPN's flagship college football preview show has been on an FCS campus. The show's on-campus presence provides great exposure for the university and the athletic program as a whole. Quietly, the Lafayette Leopards sit atop the Patriot League standings. The 2-4 Leopards are 2-0 in conference play after knocking off Fordham last week by a score of 14-10. Last season, the Leopards finished 2-9, but this season with new head coach John Garrett, they are winners of 2 straight games after starting the season 0-4. I was at their game versus Princeton this season, and despite the loss, you saw a team that didn't quit and finished the game very strong. It looks as if Coach Garrett has struck the right chord with this football team and has done a great job so far in his first season. And we'll see if they can keep things going this week as they travel to Cambridge to take on the Harvard Crimson.
I think the FCS gives a student athlete a chance to really develop in the classroom and on the field. And I don't think there's anything that gets in the way of the development of the student athlete. You know, whereas in sometimes other conferences, other levels of play, I think there's some things that could sway a student athlete in a wrong direction here or there. But I think at the FCS level, I think it's all about the student athlete. I think it's all about his development in the classroom and also on the playing field. And it really it keeps your values and your goals right in front of you. And I think there's less things that are going to take you away from those things.
Like we mentioned in the open, we are at the week 7 point of the season, so it's never too early to take a look at what could possibly or potentially be the FCS playoff field. Yes, we know that there's a lot of football still left and a lot can happen between now and Selection Sunday, but here's our look at what we think the FCS playoff field could look like if the season were to end today. Now, as we look at the bracket, as of today, our top 8 seeds are in order. James Madison, North Dakota State, South Dakota, Jacksonville State, McNeese State, Monmouth, Elon, and Wofford. And I think Monmouth is being criminally underrated right now on a national scale. The Hawks are extremely balanced and tough on both sides of the ball. And looking at the rest of the field of 24, we've created some pretty good matchups in the first round. Sam Houston State, Western Carolina would be a pretty good matchup. So would Kennesaw State and Central Arkansas, and also Western Illinois and Weber State. We also have North Carolina A&T playing Grambling in the 2017 Air Force Reserve Celebration Bowl. Now, there are some teams that are right in the hunt. Keep an eye on the Sanford Bulldogs. They're starting to get hot right now, winners of 2 straight games, and are sitting at 4-2 on the season, 2-1 in the SoCon, right behind Western Carolina, who beat them earlier this season. They'll need the Catamounts to slip up, and Sanford themselves have a tough one next week against conference leader Wofford. The Montana Grizzlies are another squad that'll be in a playoff mix as we continue to move forward. The Grizz have to make sure their defense starts to tighten up and get some stops if they want to crash the playoff party. They definitely have the offense to do so already. Nichols could be a sleeper in the Southland Conference. The Colonels are markedly better this season and have a strong defense. They beat McNeese State earlier in the year and probably should have beaten Texas A&M in College Station. Head coach Tim Rebo has done a fantastic job of turning this program around. The Patriot League is going through a rough season right now, but don't count out the Holy Cross Crusaders. Tom Gilmore's squad has one of the better quarterbacks in the FCS in Peter Puyalls, and the Crusaders can get hot offensively and score points. That always gives them a puncher's chance in any ball game. So does Lehigh's offense, but the difference between the two is that the defense for Holy Cross is much better than the defense for the Mountain Hawks. And the Stony Brook Seawolves right now are sitting at 3-1 in the ever so tough CAA, 4-2 overall in the season. They could make a strong claim as they have conference games upcoming against New Hampshire, Richmond, and Albany. Their offense, more in particular quarterback Joe Carbone, has improved big time, and the team as a whole is reaping the benefits. Like we've always said here before, there are some very talented players in the FCS that have made significant impacts this season across both professional football leagues. Here's a look at what some of the former FCS players are doing this year as pros in our look at the FCS Pro Pipeline. Let's start north of the border in the CFL, as the league's leading passer this season is the wily vet Ricky Ray of Sacramento State. The 37-year-old Ray is the league's leader in completion percentage, nearly at 70%, and yards with 4,420. Ray also has tossed 23 touchdowns to only 9 interceptions on the year for the Toronto Argonauts. Another former FCS quarterback in Illinois State's Kevin Glenn is having a great year up north. The 38-year-old former Redbird has thrown for over 3,400 yards and 21 touchdowns on the season for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The Calgary Stampeders are getting high-level production from former Montana State Bobcat Alex Singleton. The second-year vet is third amongst CFL defenders with 102 tackles, 3 sacks, and an interception. In the NFL, quarterback Carson Wentz is trekking in the right direction in his second season and is coming off his 2 best weeks of football. So far, the Eagles quarterback has thrown 10 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions on the year, and his team is flying high atop the NFC East. Rookie running back Rick Cohen, in such a short period of time, has already provided a season's worth of highlights this year. The former North Carolina A&T Aggie is averaging 6 yards a carry and is second in the NFL for receptions by a rookie with 24. Another rookie and wide receiver Cooper Kupp is doing exactly what he did at Eastern Washington. Kupp has 230 yards receiving on the season with 2 touchdowns, averaging 13.5 yards a reception for the Los Angeles Rams. Tight end Cameron Brate out of Harvard has become a formidable threat in the Bucs passing game. Brate has 205 yards receiving, hauling in 3 touchdowns as well. Defensively, the 49ers knew that they were getting a stud defensive back and former Sanford Bulldog Jaquiski Tart when they drafted him in the second round of the 2015 NFL Draft. The second-year safety has played some good ball so far this season, as he has racked up 32 tackles, 4 pass breakups, and also an interception. So, needless to say, if you want to make your professional team better, don't exclude the talent coming from the football championship subdivision.
Well, the FCS creates so many opportunities for young men. And it's, I think, and you look in our league, it's really the best. It's the best combination of winning football, but also outstanding student athletes. That's really the true model here. And a lot of the FCS programs feel the same way. And, we're blessed to be where we're at here at Lehigh, and everybody else in this league feels the same way. But the FCS, you'll see a lot of people that aren't coming necessarily to the NFL, but what they are is they're becoming leaders of industry, whatever they do when they graduate. And that's really the most important piece of going to college and playing college football, is to getting that degree. And our guys really excel in that response.
What's up, FCS fans? As some of you may already know, I am also a college football color commentator, having done some FCS and Division II games so far this season. This week, you can catch me on ESPN3 as I'll provide the color analysis for the Savannah State-Morgan State game in Baltimore, Maryland. It's homecoming for the Morgan State Bears. This will be a very good matchup between two programs that's on the come up. Both head coaches, Savannah State's Eric Rayburn and Morgan State's Fred Ferrier, are outstanding men and leaders of their squads, as they'll have their guys ready to play on Saturday. Again, you can find this game streaming live on ESPN3 or the Watch ESPN app, or if you're locally in Baltimore, you can find us on the Sports Fever television network.
I think that the main reason to choose HBCU is for the family atmosphere. The guys are going to get the core values that their parents taught them, that their family members tried to raise them. You'll have a close-knit atmosphere. You'll actually have guys that care about you as a person. So I think that's the main reason for choosing the HBCU.
Let's take a look at some of the 2018 NFL Draft prospects coming from the FCS and their matchups this week in our FBGP Scouting Prospect Outlook. Kyle Loletta out of Richmond is one of the top passers in the FCS. The senior signal caller has very good touch on his deep throws downfield, both bucket throws and throws where he has to lead the receiver. Loletta is also an above-average athlete that can get outside the pocket and throw well on the move. You also have to like his ability to work touchdown to check down, and that level of aggressiveness is what I like to see in a quarterback. I'm a big fan of the game of Elijah Marks of Northern Arizona. He's 6'1", 175, and has game that's very similar to the Detroit Lions receiver Marvin Jones. Marks is a deep threat in the Lumberjacks offense and shows the ability to track the ball really well and the rack skills that you look for. You're going to start to hear a lot about Marks as the season rolls along. Jai Franklin of Morgan State is a versatile defensive lineman that is capable of playing multiple spots up front, and I'm a big fan of his core strength and hand usage at the point of attack, both of which allows him the ability to live in the opponent's backfield. I've seen Franklin live versus Towson earlier in the season and came away highly impressed with his ability to be disruptive on both ends of defense. Cornerback Reggie Hall out of Jacksonville State is extremely talented. He's a tall corner at 6'3" and shows the ability to play his height as well. Hall has outstanding ball skills and also is a fluid athlete. He can more than hold his own on the outside at the next level. He's also very active on special teams and isn't shy about helping out in run support, so it wouldn't surprise me to see him get a Senior Bowl invite before it's all said and done. All right, we've reached the part of the show where we will preview and predict some of the big games this week on the Week 7 FCS schedule, and we will start in Norfolk, Virginia, where the Hampton Pirates meet up with the Norfolk State Spartans in the Battle of the Bay. Both teams enter this ball game unbeaten in conference play, which means they are still in the hunt for a trip to the Celebration Bowl. The Pirates have lived and died by the big play offensively, and that can be both a gift and a curse for a football team. It can be a gift because of how they were able to get out the blocks quickly and also claw back against Monmouth, and a curse because they struggle to sustain drives on offense. Now, I like the way the Spartans are starting to spread the football around on the offensive side of the ball. Now, defensively, it'll be up to the safeties to not get caught sleeping on the back end, as Hampton's QB Delman Williams does a great job of extending the play. I like Norfolk State in this ball game. Both defensive linemen Chris Lee and Nigel Chavis will do a great job up front wrecking havoc throughout the game, which will stymie the Pirates' passing attack. The Patriot League leading Lafayette Leopards travel up to Cambridge to take on the Harvard Crimson. The Leopards are on a 2-game winning streak, and a big reason why has been because of their defense. The last 2 games against Holy Cross and Fordham saw 2 excellent defensive efforts, and because of that, you have a young team that's building confidence each and every week. Harvard is completely out of sync so far this season and hasn't looked like the dominant Crimson we've seen before. Their offense has been a bit inconsistent, and they are looking to right the ship this week against Lafayette. I just don't think it will happen this week for the Crimson in this ball game. I like the Leopards. Keep an eye on freshman quarterback Sean O'Malley, who's quietly gotten better each and every game. And you talk about a guy that's building confidence each week. Look no further than O'Malley, who's playing some good ball right now. This is a pivotal game in the Northeast Conference as Bryant plays host to St. Francis. Now, the Red Flags dropped a tough one last week to Presbyterian as they were shredded on the ground by the Blue Hose. That has to be an anomaly for head coach Chris Valario, as his teams are usually stout versus the run. The Bulldogs are coming off of a bye and hope to fare better themselves on the defensive side of the ball. Their offense could be the wild card in this one, as they could get a ton of people involved throughout the game. Bryant is a young football team that's still finding their way, which is why I like St. Francis to rebound in this one. It's homecoming on the reservation as Alcorn welcomes Prairie View A&M to town. Hopefully the Panthers pack their run game and their defense, as they'll need both in this ball game. Now, the potential is there for Prairie View to generate some offense, but quarterback Lavelle McCullers has to find his accuracy early in the game if they want to have a shot. No one in the SWAC is playing hotter than the Braves right now. They're a trio of playmakers, and quarterback Lenoris Footman, running back DeLance Turner, and wide receiver Marquise Walford have ripped opposing defenses to shreds. But it will be Alcorn's defense that'll be the story after this one. I love what they bring to the table on the edge. Keep an eye out for defensive end Michael Brooks to be the factor. We should see a lot of running when Jacksonville and Butler meet up this weekend. The Dolphins come into this ball game as a top rushing team in the FCS and face a Bulldog squad that has one of the best runners in the Pioneer League in Devontae Lane. Jacksonville has flipped the script pretty quickly on their season and look to make a beeline for that top spot within the Pioneer League. Butler's defense will be put to the test, and they are giving up way too many plays on the back end. And with the way the Dolphins can run the football, the play-action passing game has the potential to connect deep down the field. This is a huge game for the Bulldogs, but I like Jacksonville to take care of business on the road. Penn travels up I-95 to New York City to face the Columbia Lions, and once the Quakers figure things out defensively, they'll get it turned around pretty quickly. Right now, Penn is struggling to get off the field on third downs and is giving up way too many big plays in the passing game. Defense isn't the issue at Columbia, it's actually a major strength. The Lions have shown the ability to not only stop the run, but turn the ball over as well. Quarterback Anders Hill is playing great and is doing a solid job of pushing this offense forward. Their running game has been adequate, but I do think they can get that rolling this week against the Quakers. I say it every week. Wide receiver Josh Wainwright is special and is primed for a breakout performance. I like Columbia. North Carolina A&T puts their undefeated record on the line against the Rattlers of Florida A&M. The Aggies are one of the more dominant teams in the FCS this season and can beat you in a multitude of ways. Quarterback Lamar Renard should garner some Walter Payton Award attention with his 17-1 touchdown to interception ratio. If FAMU is going to pull off the upset, it'll have to come via the passing game. Ryan Stanley and his talented duo of wide receivers Brendan Norwood and Marcus Williams will have to make plays on a consistent basis in order to sustain drives and wear down this defense. That's extremely easier said than done. I like the Aggies to move on to 7-0 on the season. The Rhode Island Rams travel up to Maine to face the Black Bears in a fork-in-the-road type of a game in the CAA. The Rams are much improved this season, and head coach Jim Fleming is hoping that his teams can begin to close out other squads when they have a lead. Maine's head coach Joe Harasmiak hopes the same thing for his Black Bears, and both coaches would like the self-inflicted wounds to stop, as it has been a detriment to team success. Now, this game will come down to which quarterback can you trust to not make the big mistake. We know both teams can run the football really well, but I can trust quarterback Tyler Havers just a bit more, and I think Rhodey goes up to Maine and spoils homecoming for the Black Bears. This is a big game in the Pioneer League as Campbell takes on Dayton. The Camels are off to a surprising 4-2 start and undefeated in the Pioneer League. They've done it by dominating the line of scrimmage and turning the ball over. Campbell has picked off 11 passes on the year, led by senior cornerback Carlos Merritt with 5 picks and fellow defensive back senior Dante Simmons with 4. Dayton is normally one of the top teams in this league, but are playing inconsistent football so far this season. Their defense has been inconsistent, and they have to get better on third downs. Now, they'll be put to the test early in this game. If they can win on first downs defensively and also protect the ball on offense, then they'll have a shot. But I still like the Camels in this game. Head coach Mike Minter is building something special down there with this program. Alabama A&M plays host to Mississippi Valley State this week. The Delta Devils are coming off their first win of the season against Arkansas Pine Bluff, and Valley may have solved their quarterback issues with Dwayne Betts tossing 4 touchdowns last week to no interceptions. The challenge will be their defense stopping the ground game of A&M. The Bulldogs lost their first SWAC game last week to Southern, but are still very much in the thick of that East Division race behind Alcorn State. Turnovers have doomed the Bulldogs in their losses, so look for them to play their first complete game on both sides of the ball in this one and knock out the Delta Devils. Central Connecticut State may be one of the hotter teams in the FCS right now. Winners of 3 straight games, the Blue Devils travel to Staten Island and face the Wagner Seahawks. Central Connecticut State is playing great on both sides of the ball. I've been very impressed with the defense that has given up about 11 points per game over this 3-game winning streak. Now, they've done a great job of turning the ball over as well, but Wagner is still trying to straighten the ship at quarterback since losing their starter, Alex Thompson, for the season. The offense for the Seahawks hasn't been right at all since then. Now, defensively, they are still assignment-sound football team. They are competitive, but I wouldn't expect anything less from Coach Hotaling and his staff. They do a great job over there coaching those guys up. Now, they do have a chance to play spoiler in this ball game, but I just can't see it happening against the Blue Devils. Key game in the OVC between Austin Peay and Tennessee State last week was the first time I've seen the Governors not have an answer defensively for the running game. Jacksonville State beat them along the line of scrimmage, and the Governors' offense could not move the football with any level of consistency to give their defense a rest. Now, this game, I would expect them to try and get aggressive up front to put the Tigers' offense in backed up situations. For Tennessee State, it looks like sophomore Michael Hughes will get the start again at quarterback after performing well last week in the victory over Eastern Kentucky. Defensive end Ebenezer Ogundeko also looked good in his first game back off of an injury. Austin Peay wants to play the spread game, and I think that's a game the Tigers play really well. Look for them to earn their second OVC victory. I like Tennessee State. We have a Styles Make Fights game here as Montana State travels to Cheney to take on the Eastern Washington Eagles. Don't let the 2-3 record fool you. This Bobcats team is playing some really good football, winners of 2 out of the last 3 games. They want to come in and establish a ground game, but the question will quickly turn to whether or not they can keep the Eagles offense out of the end zone. Now, the Eagles offense caught fire last week and was huge in the comeback victory over UC Davis. At some point, though, you have to wonder if it will eventually catch up to them. I think Montana State has the defense to give Eastern fits. I just don't know if offensively they'll threaten enough. I like the Eagles to win in another exciting nail-biter. Richmond and Towson meet up in a CAA tilt. The Spiders are fresh off of a double overtime win over Albany, and I like what I'm seeing from their offense. They can put up points on the board in an instant. At some point, you have to expect their defense to come around, and for Towson, it's the opposite. You hope at some point they can find some offense that they can depend on because their defense is stout, active, and does a great job of taking away what you do well. Although Richmond has their issues on defense, I don't think it will be enough to allow the Tigers to get going offensively. I like the Spiders. Talk about a big game in the Big South. We have Kennesaw State and Liberty getting together in Lynchburg, Virginia for the Flames homecoming. The Owls bring in their option attack and a smothering run defense into town. The key for the Owls will be to find ways to turn the ball over. They've been able to do so far this season, and when you generate turnovers and get the ball back to a run-heavy offensive attack, you're going to win a lot of football games. That's why it's going to be important for the Flames to protect the ball and beat Kennesaw State at their own game. That's where they failed 2 weeks ago against St. Francis. The Flames are one of the more well-balanced teams in the FCS and should continue to create offense against the Owls. I worry about their inability to stop the run, which is why I like Kennesaw State to go into Lynchburg and extinguish the Flames. Another huge matchup in the CAA as it's homecoming for Stony Brook as they welcome in New Hampshire. The Wildcats quarterback Trevor Knight has played some great ball this season, tossing 13 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. Now, the key matchup in this one will involve their offensive line. They face a stiff test against the Seawolves defense that does a great job of resetting the line of scrimmage. Stony Brook let one slip away last week against Delaware, but make no mistake about it, the Seawolves are a strong contender in the CAA and are looking to right the ship this week. You have to give a great ton of credit to quarterback Joe Carbone for transforming his game, and he's a huge part of the reason why they've enjoyed success this season. Both of these teams are built similarly, in my opinion, and I think you'll see a slight upset to many, as I like Stony Brook in this ball game. Keep an eye on running back Stacey Bedell. He's due for a big day, and I think it'll come Saturday against the Wildcats. The Northern Iowa Panthers travel to Brookings, South Dakota for a conference matchup against the Jackrabbits. The hope for Panthers head coach Mark Farley is that his defense can finally get tougher versus the run and get off the field. Right now, Northern Iowa hasn't played Northern Iowa type defense, and it's been a big reason why they're sitting at 2-3 on the season. South Dakota State got back on the winning track last week and still look like a team that has a chance to get to Frisco, Texas in January. Their hallmark has been to get out of the blocks fast and sustain that lead. They do have to do a better job of not taking their foot off the gas in the second half. I would expect them to fully take care of business in this one against the Panthers. Wofford takes their undefeated record into Johnson Haygood Stadium to battle the Citadel. Wofford has found ways to pull out games in all but one game this season. That's a sign of how mentally tough the Terriers team is and how they don't fold in pressure situations. It'll be important to own the first quarter in this contest to take away the will from the Bulldogs. I say that because the Citadel is coming off 2 consecutive losses to Sanford and Mercer, where both teams exploded out of the gates pretty quickly and made it impossible for them to come back. Granted, some of that was self-inflicted wounds and giving up big plays in the passing game, but they can't afford to give up an early deficit to Wofford. When it appears the ship is sinking, cadets tend to find ways to steady and right the ship, and I feel like the Citadel will take advantage of a Terriers defense that has been a bit suspect as of late. I like the Bulldogs in an upset. Big Sky battle at Stewart Stadium as Southern Utah travels to Weber State. The Thunderbirds have to find ways defensively to get the Wildcats off the field. Southern Utah plays solid team defense, but they have to begin to win on early downs in order to have a shot. If there's a bend but don't break type of a situation, they can still be successful against Weber State, as they have shown some inconsistency inside the red zone. Now, the Wildcats have been stellar defensively all season long. Several chops at the tree, so to speak, has given their offense the opportunity to flourish, and it'll be important for them to take advantage of a T-Birds defense that gives a lot of ground versus the run. I would expect a heavy dose of Trayshawn Garrett in this one. Look for Weber State to run their way to victory. We travel to the Southland Conference, where we find an intriguing matchup between Abilene Christian and Nichols. The Wildcats quietly have played some good defense this year under new head coach Adam Durrell, and they're fast, active, and athletic on the back end and do a great job of making things difficult for opposing offenses. Now, their offense has been the inconsistent part so far in 2017 and has to get fixed moving forward. I'm a big fan of the progression of this Nichols Colonels bunch. They're strong defensively, but also get solid play from an offense led by a strong running game. Now, the hope is that quarterback Chase Forcade can be healthy enough to be a full goal this week. Either way, this team is too strong to have a letdown. Look for the Colonels to win at home. Next, we have Chattanooga and Mercer, and the Mocs have been a slight disappointment this season. Their offense hasn't really gotten it going all season long, and they face a Mercer squad that puts a lot of pressure on your offense to match their level of production. Now, the Bears are a few plays away from being 5-1 on the season. Instead, they are sitting at 3-3. Now, with that said, they still can position themselves for an at-large bid with a strong finish to the season, as they have some big games coming up. We'll learn a lot about this Bears team in this one. Can they put a team away and win a game that they're supposed to win? I believe so. So look for Mercer's offense and defense to put together their best and most complete output of the season and get the W. Eastern Illinois has been one of the more slept-on teams in the FCS this season. They travel to take on Murray State this week. I guess many are still taking a wait-and-see approach with this ball club, as their offense has been rather iffy, so to speak, this season. Their defense has been the real story and a key part of their 3-game winning streak. Murray State has finally gotten off the mat last week with an impressive upset win over UT Martin, so you know from a confidence perspective they are riding high and feel as though they can pull off back-to-back upsets. I think you'll see a defensive slugfest in this one, with Eastern Illinois having just enough offense to eke out their 4th straight win. East Tennessee State travels to Western Carolina to take on the Catamounts, and we've called the Bucks a fly-in-the-ointment team in the SoCon. They are 3-3 on the season. They play an enthusiastic brand of football. They love to spread the field offensively and are a very opportunistic bunch on the defensive side. Can they remain gap sound and disciplined versus a Western Carolina squad that has a lot of speed and explosiveness in the backfield? The Catamounts are coming off a tough loss to Wofford in overtime in a game that they had won but let slip away. It's about putting teams away early. That's why they have to come into this matchup versus East Tennessee State with the right mindset and not allow one loss to become 2. Look for them to rebound and run their way to victory over a pesky Bucks team. The Dartmouth Big Green are 4-0 on the season and face a Sacred Heart team that has lost 3 straight games. Where Dartmouth has been impressive this season is in the trenches. That's where the Big Green has been the most consistent. It has allowed them to run the ball offensively and stop the run on the defensive side. Coincidentally, that's where the usually strong Sacred Heart team has struggled. This is uncharacteristic for a Mark No-Free squad. They are giving up way too many yards on the ground. The talent is definitely there for them to turn it around, but I just can't see it happening this week against Dartmouth. I like the Big Green. This game was runner-up for Game of the Week. North Dakota State and Youngstown State always play close, competitive ball games. This one will be more of the same. You talk about a dominating defense. The Bison are yielding only 6 points per game to opposing offenses, and they've done it mostly without their 2 stars for the majority of the season in linebacker Nick DeLuca and defensive end Greg Menard. That just goes to show you the depth and talent that they possess on this roster. Offensively, we know the Bison will come in and try to establish the ground game first, early, and also often. That'll be the biggest test for a Penguin squad that's stout defensively. Youngstown State has been stellar all season long. They're coming off a tough loss to South Dakota, and this game, the matchup gets a little bit easier, so to speak, as they don't have to worry about a quarterback to beat them on the ground as much as they did last week. Where you like to see them tighten up is on the back end from a do-your-job perspective. They've allowed too many big plays deep down the field last week, and we know North Dakota State does a great job off of play action. Both teams can run, both teams can play great defense, so it will come down to the passing game, and I have to side with Easton Stick and the North Dakota State Bison. Stick has thrown 10 touchdowns to 0 interceptions this season. I'd say that's getting the job done. Now it's time for our Stats FCS Game of the Week preview, and this week we have an obvious choice as it's James Madison against Villanova. First-year head coach Mark Ferrante has continued to carry on the tradition of strong defensive play from the Wildcats and has a tall task in this contest against the Duke's high-powered offensive attack. Where Villanova frustrates teams has been in the trenches. That's been their hallmark for decades. This is a group on both sides of the ball that does a great job of resetting and also establishing the line of scrimmage. Now, they've battled through some key injuries so far this season, but if anyone is able to overcome that, is this Wildcats team, as they are extremely well coached and have a deep, talented roster. James Madison is the reigning national champs and are playing like they are underdogs in every game. This team can play any style of game that you want. If the situation calls for 50 pass attempts, they can do that. If it calls for 50 run attempts, they can do that as well. Hell, if it calls for both, they can do that too. I've been impressed with running backs Trey Sharp and Carton Johnson all season long. Both have the ability to ring that cash register pretty quickly, and they'll be looking to cash in early against Villanova. Now let's take a look at some of my coaching points for both teams in this ball game. For Villanova, it's all about winning the openers. That's the first quarter, third quarter, opening series of both halves. That's how you're able to set the tone and dictate the terms of a ball game. Also, the Wildcats have to be able to eliminate the escape routes for both quarterback Brian Shore and the Duke's running backs by getting push instead of pressure. You can't fly up the field and leave gaps in the defense because Shore has the mobility to step up and outside the pocket, and Sharp and company can find that crease and take it to the house. You want to force JMU to play downhill and not have them work with the entire field. And finally, it's about productive possessions. Remember, points add up, and you need points to win the football game last time I checked, so don't miss any opportunities to put up threes against a football team like James Madison. Also, if you're not able to score, 3 first downs to flip field position is just as good. You have to make JMU earn it by giving them a long field to work with. For James Madison in this ball game, it's about making it a track meet. The Wildcats will try to take the air out of the ball and control the tempo and pace of the game, but you have to make that difficult by pushing the pace and making them play your game, and that's a fast, up-tempo style, and you can't beat yourself. Ball security will be key in this ball game. Granted, the Dukes have been great in this area. Don't turn the ball over as it is, but they can't let this game be the game where all of that goes to the wayside, and they have to win up front defensively. The Wildcats have a big offensive line and will love to just lean on this Duke's defensive front and wear them down. Getting creative with stunts and pressures up front could keep their offensive line off balance and help with getting key stops early in the ball game. Let's take a look at some X factors in this ball game for the Wildcats. I believe the biggest X factor is running back Aaron Forbes. Villanova will lean on Forbes to keep this offense on pace and help knock out the Dukes. Right now, with all of the injuries, the Wildcats' passing game may be a liability, and they have to be able to run the football to win. For James Madison, I look at defensive tackle Cornell Urquhart as the biggest X factor in this ball game for the Dukes. To stop the run, you have to own the interior, and that's where Urquhart, who has 23 tackles and 4.5 TFLs on a season, can have the biggest impact in this ball game for James Madison. I like James Madison in this ball game. They'll have to earn it, as the Wildcats will be a tough defensive opponent for them. The Dukes have the ability to attack anywhere on the field they want to, and it's that multiplicity within their offense that makes them dangerous. So that's it for this week's episode of the FCS Kickoff. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, and if you missed this episode or want to find other episodes, visit the website footballgameplan.com/FCS Kickoff. Also, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes to the FCS Opening Drive podcast, where yours truly and David Hashagen will break down the previous week of the FCS and take an early look forward to what we have in store for the upcoming week.